Good afternoon. It's 2:56 in the afternoon on Monday, the 2nd of June. I've been up since 12:30, a little after midnight last night. I'm kind of exhausted. I've been kind of sick. I've been weak. And you can tell I'm hoarse. I have a bad cold, and I'm not myself, So if you would remember me in prayer, I would most certainly appreciate it. I've been working on my devotional. I got the edited copy submitted to the publisher today. Now I'm working on the book cover. Hopefully that book will be out. I'm hoping by the end of the month if I can get the cover submitted. I've got the 285 pages of the devotional submitted. And thanks to Avonlea Smith for all of her work in editing. Anyway, I want to talk today about something that you may or may not have an interest in. It's going to be a rather short devotional, but I want to talk about it, and that is clicks. Clicks. Another name we used to use is the Good Old Boy Network. Okay. And it's just human nature to always want to try to suck in with people and get in with them and say all the right things so you're accepted. Analyze your audience. Tell them what they want to hear. I recently had a person say to me, I understand you're a pastor and you've got, thousands of messages on sermon audio and so on. And I said, no, I don't call myself a pastor. I don't call myself a preacher, and I'm not ordained by some denomination. But I said, I do proclaim the gospel. I was telling Brother Michael Smith, I feel like it's a blessing that I was never ordained by a church. I feel like it's a blessing because I've attended over 100 churches in my lifetime, 150 churches in my lifetime. And there's a lot of cliques. There's a lot of good old boy networks. I had a friend of mine recently went and visited a church, and he said him and his family were treated like scum. Like that church didn't want them to be there. What's really interesting is if you ever go to Bible conferences, and you're not an ordained minister, all the ordained ministers get together and they rarely talk to anyone outside of their own kind. They don't talk to the average ordinary member in the church. They talk to the ones that have all the titles and all the degrees hanging on their wall and their ordination papers hanging up on their walls. Have you ever noticed how if you go to a Bible conference, the preachers are always the ones wearing the nicest clothes and driving the nicest cars? Isn't that interesting? And most of them live in the nicest houses and have the largest 401ks. Okay. I don't think Christ had the knife. Said he didn't even have a place to lay his head. I don't think Christ had any degrees up on the wall or any ordination papers. And I don't think he was a part of any good old boy network, unless you want to consider his apostles his good old boy network. Most people are just looking for people's acceptance. Go along to get along. Whatever you have to say to be accepted. The old saying, when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? Well, that's kind of what's on my mind this morning. You know, Christ said if you're in Christ, you'll suffer persecution. Now, you won't be a part of the good old boy network. You won't be a part of some clique or some club. Now, there's nothing wrong with having fellowship. But sometimes when I get around preachers, I get the feeling that they feel like they're just a cut above everybody else. And you know, Christ said just the opposite. You know, remember the disciples came and said, who's going to sit on your right hand? Who's going to sit on your left? What do you tell them? Told him that it wasn't his position to do that. It was his Father's role to determine that. But he said, let him among you who wants to be first be last. Be the servant. He rebuked the Pharisees for wanting to stand in the high places and in the marketplaces with their robes and their long phylacteries. And remember what the Pharisee prayed? I thank God I'm not like this publican. The publican smote upon his breast, and it says the publican went home justified. I don't want to be a part of a good old boy network. I don't want to be a part of a clique. You know, I don't need to attend master's college. I don't need to go to a theological cemetery where a bunch of dead folks are. I attended a cemetery for one semester, you know, and I found out real quickly that it was the furthest thing from being biblical. They called themselves Evangelical Theological Seminary. It's Evangelical Theological Cemetery is what it was. Well, I hope you all have a good day. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be in a little bit better, feel a little bit better. God bless.